Hi everyone, ready for the latest instalment in this army rat care. So this one is another one on my breeding series. I'm going to talk a little bit about matings. Now this is quite timely, as discussed in my last video. I've been mating up Mog for some time. So Mog has actually finally mated when I'm doing this, but I've got a few videos I've taken that I'll kind of slot into this later on, probably towards the end actually, which just shows you some of the kind of early matings and then the one that was actually successful. So the first thing I need to say about matings is it's not as simple as sticking two rats together. They can be in the right mood, they can be in the wrong mood. It's all down to the doe, so the doe is key in this in the majority of cases. Oh, sorry, Chocobo's up to something, I'm not sure what. Excuse me a minute. Come here, Choc. The troublemaker is retrieved. Right, so what we're looking for in a doe is the doe needs to be on heat in order for mating to be successful. The bucks can be as interested as they want, but if the doe's not on heat, she'll kick him out of the way and basically avoid him, or sometimes, in some cases, she might attack him. It's quite interesting, really, that the doe has a lot of control in this relationship. So, what are heats? Heats are basically when the girls are fertile for a period of time, and it happens every 5 days roughly. It might be 4 days, might be 6 days. In some cases, particularly over winter and the darker months, it can stretch out and be a lot longer. Or in the really hot months, again, it can stretch out because they're not optimum breeding periods. But should you get spring or autumn, it's usually going to be for a kind of young, fit doe around about 5 days. So when they're on heat, how do you tell? Now, I will try and get one of mine at some point when they come past, see if any of them are on heat. Chocobo isn't at the moment. The key way you test actually is by tickling them on the bum, and if they go a little bit nuts, I don't think they're on heat. No, you're not. Yeah, if they go a little bit nuts, so by that I mean they'll spring forward, they'll vibrate and shake their ears around, look very fetching to any eligible males that are around. So they will look a bit like that, and that's what we're looking for. If they're on heat, they will then hopefully allow the male to mate them. But you have to wait for that time in order for the male to mate. Now you can introduce a doe to a male when they're not on heat, and at some point they will come on heat, and they're to do with different kind of mating methods that different breeders use, and I'll try and cover the main ones. I'll probably miss some, but they're the ones that I'm aware of and the kind of different options that people can take. And you'll also see examples of what I do personally, what approach I take. So doe is on heat every 5 days. So then what you need to do is, when she's on heat, you need to make sure she's around the buck. That's the principle there. If that happens, then usually it's fairly straightforward. I say this, then it's all down to the buck. If the buck is not particularly driven, the doe might be wildly on heat, trying to kind of flirt with him as much as possible, get him to mate with her. And then it's down to the buck choosing to then mate the doe, and it can be very, very easy in some cases and very, very difficult, time consuming, and in some cases the buck can just be not interested. It really does depend on the character, and generally speaking, if you've got a relatively youngish buck, let's say you're around about the 9 months to 14 months age, they're kind of fairly prime of their life, they're quite interested in does. They'll be kind of right up for it. They might miss a few times, they might get a little bit confused, but they're going to be enthusiastic usually. If you've got an older buck that hasn't mated before, let's say they're getting on 18 months, something like that, kind of showing their age perhaps a little bit, or even if they're not showing their age, they're that long into their life, they're not as hormonally driven, and they can just think, meh, that's not worth the effort, because I'll be honest, the doe darts around like a nutter, and they've got to try and keep up in order to mate, and that's partly how the doe ensures that their buck is as fit as possible. So that's kind of one of the tricks. And what you can also find is if you breed very, very chilled, relaxed, loving, not the slightest bit of kind of resistance to anything you do type bucks, you can often find they're not that interested because you're slowly but surely breeding the testosterone out of them, and the testosterone is actually fairly key if you want to kind of get them to mate successfully. You don't want so much that they become nasty, aggressive, hormonal bucks, but you want enough that they're interested in the doe if you want to mate. So those are the kind of two aspects. You need the doe that's on heat and lets the buck mate her, and then you want the buck that's actually interested in doing the mating, and then the rest is the period of time that you need to leave them together in order for a successful mating to happen. So what are the different ways to do that? I kind of probably classify these by amount of time that the book and doe are together. So the method that I tend to favour, which involves a fairly short period of time for them together, I would probably call one night stand. So what you do is every day you'll check whether the doe's on heat or not. You'll either do that by physically looking at them, so I will probably try and insert some pictures, so when a doe is not on heat, their kind of vaginal opening is closed, or very, well, not fully closed, but it's quite tight. It's not gaping, as you will see in the second picture that I will show, which is when the doe is on heat and it's slightly wider. And then you also have the kind of tickle test, so tickle the bum, do the spring around and such. Not every doe will show either of those signs, but they often will. So you can kind of, if you know your does, you can have a look at them, go, oh, yes, you're in the mood, or you're not in the mood. Another approach is to actually put the doe and the buck straight into a cage, and by a cage I mean a mini cage, so you're talking about something so big, or you could do a show tank or a small carrier, but the idea is you don't want a lot of space because you want the buck to actually be able to catch the doe, and you want to give them a head start really, as much as the doe might think it's great fun to leap all over, let's say, an Alaska or an SRS trying to avoid the buck. It doesn't quite work. Don't ask me who's having a fight right now. But there is definitely some squabbles going on in the cage. We shall see whether they resolve that one later. Yeah, so you want to give the buck a fighting chance, so use a smallish cage, something that you can leave a water bottle on, because it's potentially going to be a decent length of time, and both of them actually will need a drink, because it's quite a lot of energy on both their parts. So small cage, put them in. If the doe immediately kicks the buck around, then they are not interested. If the doe is very receptive of the buck, they are interested. I'm now going to cut to a couple of videos that show you when I first tried Moggle Mog. You will see in that she did not like it. I talk over it a little bit. She did not like the poor boy at all, poor Howard. He's a very nice boy. But you will see that kind of response. Hers was quite an extreme response, I would say. You get varying response from does, and I will show one after that which shows Mog when she's got used to the idea of this big massive hulking buck being in her space, and that was kind of midway through the kind of trials of mating with that. So I'll do a quick cut now, and then we will insert that one shortly. So we've got a quick video here, and this is Mog and Howard take one. So basically this is the first time I'm going to put Howard in with Mog. I'm not sure if Mog's on heat. She's a little bit jumpier than normal, and I don't think she's fully on heat if she is on heat. But sometimes they're kind of almost there, and putting them in with a book tells you it a lot more obviously, so I'm going to try it. So this is the one night stand method, so I will try him in until she is on heat and receptive, and then I'll spend the night with her. So, Howard, are you ready to do the business? Licking me? You don't want to lick me, you want to lick her, see? Right, so I'll add Howard to the cage. One thing you may notice here is I've unclipped either of the sides here. This means if something does kick off, and it's pretty rare to be honest, I can just whiz the top off and separate them. It's a very quick and easy way of doing it. So let's see what Howard makes of her. Now this kind of sniffing is very normal. He'll go straight for her bits, which is very much kind of asking her age, her date of birth. Now Mog is straight away not particularly interested, so this kind of standing off behaviour is saying, nope, I'm not in the mood. She finds him interesting, and actually you can read a little bit into that sometimes. That sometimes means that she may come into heat later, but today I think it's very much a nope. They're not being nasty, but there's no point in me continuing this one. So we'll try this one again tomorrow. Come on, mister. She's not in your mood for you today. In fact, I'll leave you in. I've got another doe to try him with. Oh, come on, Mog. It's only me. Right, Mog's a bit upset, so we'll just take her out a different way. See? There. It's a bit stressful when you've never seen a boy before and suddenly your mum puts her in with you, but she's fine. She's just a bit startled. So that's the first attempt at trying them. We'll try again later, and we'll see. Well, when I say later, I mean tomorrow, and we shall see whether Mog is more in the mood. So it's been a few days of trying with Mog and Howard now. As you can see, she's substantially calmer than she was the first few times, but she's still most definitely not in heat, as you can see from her kicking him in the face. This is fairly normal, but she's also a lot more accepting of it. I think she's got used to the idea. I'm not going to leave them for any particular length of time like this, because she'll get fed up with him, but the fact she's a lot more happy around him makes it a little bit easier. She's just not up for anything more than occasional sniffs. You mug. You sweethearts. They do make a very beautiful pair though. But you can see the difference in her behaviour just from kind of getting used to things rather than being quite shocked on her first night is quite apparent. It's quite nice to see actually her relaxing a little bit. So hopefully tomorrow I'll keep on trying and maybe we'll get some mating soon. So you've now seen a couple of examples where Mog's been mated, and you can, well, when I say mated, she wasn't actually successfully mated while Mog's been in with the book. You can see that how her kind of approach to things changes from a very, very upset, freaked out doe to a doe that was much more kind of accepting, and she wasn't in the mood, but she wasn't kind of getting upset about it. That's mostly down to experience in her behalf. You'll find some does react well, some does react badly. Some does don't seem to have even noticed the book's there, and some are fascinated. And actually sometimes you'll find that when a doe has been a bit like standoffish with the book for a few nights in a row, they will then one day be quite interested in the book, and it's quite often the next day they're on heat, so it's kind of like a warm-up period. So you look out for that kind of thing. What I will tend to do is, like you saw, put the book in with the doe, see how it goes. If it goes successfully, then we will go for the one night stand. So I will leave the book in with the doe all night, and then in the morning I'll separate them and pop the book in back in with this group. So why do I use this approach? I use this approach because it basically keeps a minimum time for the book to be with the doe. Generally speaking, when I'm using books, those books live happily with as a pet group for somebody, whether it's another breeder or it's a pet owner. So I need to maximise the chances that they will have absolutely no problem getting back in with the group. I don't want any stress, any kind of tension there. So just one night, put them back in the group, and they go in no trouble. Occasionally they get rather horrifically sniffed by their book friends who think they smell amazing because they smell of ladies. But generally speaking, it's fairly straightforward. Once or twice I've had to put them in a small cage for half an hour just so they can kind of get the sniffing and the rough and tumble over with, and then they're back in the group. So it does minimise that time. Most of the other options involve an extended period of time. So the doe is in with the book it can be for a week, it can be for as long as it takes until she looks pregnant. I've worked out now what the fighting sounds as you hear are. I put an empty oil bottle out, and they're currently fighting over who gets to take it, so that's free range for them tonight, fighting over oil. You're not doing it though, are you, Luna? Yes, so that's the kind of principle. It's a quick return back to the cage, and because you know the doe's on heat, and usually I'll stick around and watch them mate a couple of times, it's always quite satisfying when they do first mate, because you know once they've got the knack of that, then you leave them to it, and then they'll do plenty through the night, and the doe has got a very good chance of being pregnant at the end of it. Not always, because not all matings lead to successful pregnancy, but they've got a good chance if it's happened a few times. Sometimes the book will faff around like mad and not really get round to anything. They'll get confused, they won't be interested. What I've found I've had to do a few times is hand in the cage and ruffle the book's fur up a little bit to try and get them excited. But this is why, and I think I mentioned it in one of the early videos, always have a backup plan. Ideally have that backup plan in the room, because if the book really isn't getting it, or if the book is being a little bit aggressive towards the doe, you might want to change your plans. And by aggressive I mean you don't mind a book that occasionally puts the doe where he wants it to go, as long as he's not actually attacking the doe. So I've had only one case over the years actually of a book that took things a bit too far. He got very, very upset. He could not, whatever he did, get the doe into the right position for him. So he started kind of biting her, and they ended up in a little rat ball. So that was separated very quickly. And I had his brother in the room who was far kind of calmer. My second choice, a good second choice, so I moved him in. So that's kind of why have your plan B there, particularly if you're doing like this one night stand method, because not all books will eventually get round to it. So I'll quickly stop the video again and show you what happens when it is successful. So this is the mating, and there's no real voiceover other than I think there's a small cheer at the end, because by this stage with Mog we'd been trying for 2 weeks to try and get her mated, and she just hadn't come onto heat. And it's really interesting actually, because all through those 2 weeks, tried every night, not interested at all in poor Howard, who was first choice. Yes, they're definitely fighting over the oil bottle. So then what we ended up doing was I entered into a show thinking when they go to the shows they quite often come on heat, stopping overnight at my friend's house, and she suddenly came. Well, I didn't know she was on heat, but we just thought she's not liking Howard, checked her, tickled her, no sign whatsoever. I just thought she's not liking Howard. My second choice, and a very, very close second choice, as in like just really good rat, was Todd, Howard's brother. He's a lovely top-eared version of Howard, very, very friendly. He was actually the pick of the litter for books when they were born, so good choice. And he was just happened to be in the room then, so we thought, let's try Todd. She might just not fancy Howard, and that does happen. And as soon as we put Todd in, she was wildly on heat. I immediately started videoing it, and then you get to see that, which we'll go on to in a little bit. But it kind of shows, and actually what was interesting was Howard developed an abscess under his throat. They're fairly common glandular abscesses, and I'm fairly sure that part of the reason she wasn't coming onto heat was she could smell this on him, and she was making the choice that she didn't want her partner, her father of her kittens, to be not in perfect health. And I think that's really quite powerful. It's something that I always try and do myself, but sometimes you've got to respect what the doe's chosen, because she might have done it for a reason. And whilst Howard will be fine and he's already well on the mend now, it's something that I think was particularly interesting, and Todd was in perfect health, prime of life, and did a really good job, and clearly Mog quite liked him. So let's go over, and what you'll notice with sorry, I think Luna might be going on to heat, which would be really handy for the purposes of this video. No, she's not now doing it. This is the bum tickle that I was talking about. You see she's slightly jerky though. I think she might be coming onto heat, but not yet fully onto it. And she is quite wide open there, as you'll see. Right, so I'll break and let you watch the video. You'll notice, I don't film for ages, I kind of just do the kind of first mating, but you notice it's very quick. You'll notice how obviously Mog is on heat on the video at the start, the jerking around and bouncing. You'll also notice Todd's very interested in her. Very sniffy, doesn't really know straight away what to do, he's never mated before, but he very quickly gets it. He's not an old buck, he's nearly a year but not quite, so he's kind of got all that kind of macho energy, prime of his life, so he gets straight on with it, mates very, very quickly, and then goes back to licking his bits. That is the cycle that's then repeated. Depending on the fitness of the buck involved, it can be quite a rapid one. Or it can take a little bit longer. Usually it speeds up as they get a knack of it. So I think he ended up doing kind of a couple of matings, small break, couple of matings, small break, probably for all night, for all we could tell. We left them to it after about half an hour. And they seemed very content with each other in the morning. They were very relaxed around each other. So over to Mog and Todd. Yep, she's definitely on heat. I think she's trying to mate with her head. Come on, Dad. Come on. Yay! So now you've seen that, so Mog and Todd had a very nice night. Very good example of the one night stand method. Both went in with their cage mates with no trouble the next day, very relaxed and happy. So that kind of is where it's quite useful. The other useful thing about the one night stand method is I can now calculate what day Mog is due. So I've actually got some of that on here, so you'll notice we've got when Mog mated, day 21, so day 21, and we'll come to that later on in this series, is when I normally take my does and put them into a separate cage with a friend for a day, maybe a day and a half, just to get settled in their birthing cage. So So I know when to do that, and then day 23 is normally when they're due. So I'm expecting Mog babies around about the 6th of January. We shall see. They might be a day later, they might be a day early, they may not come. One thing I've learned in life is to not count my kittens before they're born, because not everything goes to plan. But that's roughly the dates I'm expecting. That's a good reason why I do the one night stand method, because I like to know my dates. I don't like to have to predict it off shape, because some does can look enormous quite early on in the kind of game, and some does take ages, and it'll be like day 21 before they get any belly on them at all. So I like to know. I'm maybe a bit of a control freak in that, but it suits me very well to know when I'm separating my does. So up to that point, my girls go straight back in with the group. So Mog is currently free ranging with the rest. I suspect she's one of the people making the screaming noises over the oil bottle, which has been forgotten and dropped on the floor now, so maybe they'll pop round and visit me. Only Luna loves me more than oil. So they're all back in the group, and it's great. So that's the one night stand method. The next method I'll call the honeymoon. So that is basically where you put a doe and a buck in together, and you put them in for about a week, or at least 5 or 6 days. So the idea is you're going to cover a heat period in that period of time. So they'll spend a period of time in something, a smallish cage like an Alaska, nothing fancy, but enough space that they can still move around and do things and kind of react and such. And in that period of time, you know they will have mated. There's a small variation between those two methods, where actually you just put the doe and the buck in together every night, all night, for 5 or 6 nights. You may not see the mating, you may not know the date, but you know they're probably going to get pregnant. So those are both kind of similar approaches. One involves the buck being in there all the time, one involves the buck just being in there for certain days. So that's kind of how it normally works. That one works fairly well. You won't know the exact date, but you'll know within about a week when they should be due. And it means a lot less faffing around. So the problem with the one night stand method is you have to do it every single night. You have to be present and kind of keep an eye on them for a period of time every single night. And if it doesn't happen in the kind of within the 5 days, it can take ages. Like every single night I was trying Mog, and it can start to irritate or frustrate the buck. He really wants to mate, the doe isn't in the mood, and it can start stressing out the doe as well. So you kind of have to play it by ear on that one. The longer period of time, they can generally settle a bit. They might have a bit of kind of scrappiness at first, or they might get on very, very well. It does depend on the doe and buck. So you have to kind of play it by ear on those ones. The final option is probably the marriage, let's call it, and that is a case of putting the doe in with the buck for a long period of time. And you may actually put more than one doe in with that buck if you've got the kind of thing, and they will stay there right until the doe looks ready to pop, and then you'll take the buck out, and then doe will birth in that cage. So again, you want a kind of cage you can use for birthing cage, and it can. I've heard of cases where that doe and buck have been together for months. Sometimes when you're trying to breed through difficult times, like winter's a crap time to breed, as Mog proved by taking so long to come into heat. Rats are not designed to have babies in winter or in the real hot heat of summer, because it's not the best time to raise a litter, so they don't kind of come into heat as often. When they do come into heat and mate, the pregnancies are less likely to work out, so that's one of the reasons why I'm not kind of counting on Mog babies by any means. So you have to kind of see how it goes. And I've seen breeders also use it where they've got like an older doe that they definitely want to get a last litter out of, but she may not be hugely fertile, and that's why it can take months and months in some cases, or it can just happen very quickly and they spend, let's say, 3 weeks together, and then you notice her being massive, take the buck out, and so on. The downside of that is it can be quite difficult to get the buck to successfully live with other bucks. It can happen, it can work out in some cases. In other cases you may need to castrate that buck, or you might need it to live with a spayed doe or an infertile doe. So it might be a doe that you've tried for months and months and she hasn't come into season. Though I will say sometimes they surprise you, and I do know of cases where there's been a supposed infertile doe that's actually popped out kittens when everybody was convinced she was completely infertile. Rats don't kind of stop being fertile at a set age. It can take as long as it wants in a way, and sometimes changes can affect them. So one case I can think of, a breeder homed a buck to be his stud, but with his retired kind of doe friend who had been with him for months and months and never had babies, but they've got on really well, so sent him over there so he could do his job, have some babies, and they could still live together happily afterwards. I think she got pregnant virtually immediately when going to her new home, and popped out some babies just over 3 weeks later, which is quite impressive really. It's that change of home suddenly triggered whatever instinct she'd got, and she went on to heat, mated and had these babies. I think she was around about 2 as well. She was not a young doe, but she raised them very well and did a good job of it. So it wasn't the end of the world, but it's something to bear in mind with that kind of situation. So then you've got your kind of your kind of 3 mating methods there. So they're all kind of various time periods. So one's like a single night, one's multiple nights or several days, and one's kind of a long period of time, as long as it takes. One of the downsides in doing a long period of time thing, particularly if it does take a long period of time, is you could be breeding a degree of infertility into your rats. So by leaving them for as long as it takes to get pregnant, you could be kind of making that more normal in your lines. So it might take 2 or 3 months to kind of get one doe to mate, and it's like that her children may then inherit that trait, and so on. So you could then set that in the line. So I wouldn't want to do it regularly, unless the does are mating quite quickly and getting pregnant quite quickly normally, just because you don't want that to be the kind of normal. You don't want to have to leave the does in for 3 or 4 months every single time when you're mating them. So basically pick a vet which suits you best. Sorry, just keep hearing bangs, that definitely is them. I really shouldn't have given them an oil bottle just before filming. But yes, see how that goes. The method you choose should suit you. You don't have to do the method I do, it's just what suits me. There are probably other methods out there. I think as long as none of the rats are getting injured or stressed, then they're fine. Just make it work as it goes. So what happens next? I'm going to do a proper one on the whole pregnancy period as like another video, but I'll just give you a quick feel. So rats are pregnant from average around about 23 days. 21 to 24 is kind of a normal period. So at the moment Mog's actually about a week in, and I suspect she is pregnant. I don't always know, I can't always tell, and in the next video I'll talk about the kind of signs that you can take. So we shall see how that goes, and I will try and get you a video on pregnancy in the next week or 2, and then we can look at hopefully birthing and babies and that side of things in the videos afterwards. So hope you have a good time, hope you're interested. Hopefully Moggle Mog will keep us all entertained with babies. Mini Moggle Mogs is a very exciting prospect. So see you, and I hope you have a good time.